Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to everybody. Peace be upon you. I'm truly drained, so I will be reading off the paper, so excuse me, please. With the difficulty comes ease, Allah says in the Quran. Allah also says in the Quran, whatever mercy Allah unfolds for the people, no one can behold it. And whatever He withholds, no one can release it except Him. And He is the Almighty, All-Wise. We are a community in pain. But part of the remedy is coming together of the community, that we have each other. Together we are the solution. We care for each other. Inshallah, there will be some education around certain topics, but this is primarily a place to gather, to hear concerns, and express our grief. None of us are immune to hard feelings. Our Imam, or being a panelist, does not mean we are not affected by the experiences happening across the community. So we are here to listen to each other and benefit from each other. We are going to be non-judgmental and understanding. Again, we are going to be non-judgmental and understanding that everyone comes with different experiences. If the discussion makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to stay. If it gets heavy, you can walk out at any point or reach out to one of the organizers if you need anything. We will be having a panel of mental health specialists followed by support groups in the rooms as assigned on posters for age-oriented discussions outside on the main floor. The activity will be going on from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Thank you all for being present today, and your feedback is highly appreciated as we pursue these activities on the long term. I especially thank our Imam and religious leader at Noor Islamic Center and the volunteers who made this happen in a very short period of time. This is really remarkable. Imam Abdul Munim, who is joining our tireless efforts to warmly welcome every being entering our center. Imam sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. I would like actually to start with recitation of some ayat of Al-Quran, if you allow me, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما صدق الله العظيم. Assalamu alaikum again. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The beginning, inshallah, of this beautiful night, I just want to remind you with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتعاطفهم وتراحمهم كمثل الجسد الواحد. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the authentic hadith, the likeness of the believers are like one body. If one organ or one limb of this body complained, all the body gonna participate with sahar, they cannot sleep, and with humma, with fever. The likeness of believers in their mutual love and mercy, sympathy. That's what the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And of course, everybody knows that the great communities, when something happens in, the whole community should stand up and help and support. And that's what we are doing right now. We think this night, inshallah, gonna be very beneficial to everybody. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. No shame upon you when you say that, I don't know, I need to learn. That's what we are doing tonight. Maybe we have an elephant in the room, but we deny it. Maybe we have a problem in our houses, with our families, in our masjid, but sometimes we do not recognize it because we are not experts. So we got, alhamdulillah, for you tonight, the experts who gonna tell us if we have a problem, how can we solve it? This is inshallah gonna be tonight. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Oh Allah, increase my knowledge. Increase my knowledge. So we always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us because we need Allah's guidance. Without Allah's guidance, we get lost. Finally, we are talking about the most precious thing in the world, your life, my life. And which is more important than my life and your life, the life of our children. We care about the community, and I love this community because once something gonna happen, you will see the whole community gonna stand up like tonight, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. I think I'm done. You're gonna introduce Dr. Asim, inshallah.
Thank you, Imam Abdul Monem. We have babysitting for ages 2 through 5 in the basement. So if you would like to have the little ones downstairs, you can do that, age 2 through 5. Thank you. Next is Dr. Asim Farouqi, and
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you all for your interest in devoting your time to learn a little bit about mental health. I believe this is the first time NICC has made an attempt at this level to educate our community on how to access mental health resources locally. I wanted to give you a brief layout of what are the objectives of today's talk. I'm sorry? No, I can hold it. All right. So, I guess the goals are to understand the current model of mental health disorders that we work around, understanding the multidisciplinary team approach in mental health, know the role of primary care providers and various mental health care providers because there are several, and also how to navigate the mental health care delivery system in Columbus area, accessing mental health care providers within the local Muslim community, and I was asked to also comment briefly on the grief process. So our current understanding of psychiatric disorders is that it follows a biopsychosocial spiritual model. There are elements from biopsychosocial areas as well as spiritual areas that come together from all these domains, and they affect each other in bringing about a mental illness. And so in order to treat mental illness, we also basically act in all these different areas. We intervene in all these different areas through different disciplines of mental health care providers. Spiritual domain is obviously instrumental in how we experience illness and how we recover from it. People may have genetic vulnerabilities, which is what puts them at risk. Then a psychological trauma and a social stressor coming together overwhelm their coping skills to where their balance breaks down, and then they have a mental illness which is clinically diagnosable. So one by one, we'll all talk about our different roles in mental health care, starting with the primary care provider. This is your initial point of contact. Your primary care provider would be the one who would initially screen you and assess the severity of the illness. There is a tendency in our community to not pay attention to the screening tools. These are forms that you get when you go to the primary care provider, and we don't pay attention and accurately fill those out. So I urge you to be really upfront with those forms, because there are no blood tests, there are no lab tests for psychiatric illnesses. It's how you report your symptoms is how the primary care provider will be able to diagnose you or not diagnose you. So the primary care provider may decide to treat simple depression, simple anxiety, but themselves, because they have some training in mental health, they don't have advanced level training in mental health, so they may also consider referring the patient to a psychiatrist. They may work with a psychologist or a therapist, a counselor, where a counselor typically provides psychotherapy, the talk therapy, and the physician, the primary care provider, will provide the medication, a psychotropic medication. So, okay. When you talk to your primary care provider, as I already mentioned, be upfront, don't minimize and don't exaggerate. Prepare ahead of your visit. If you have a laundry list of symptoms or questions, write them down. Bring a friend or a relative with you as a double check. Be upfront, as I said, and ask questions if you have any. The role of a psychiatrist, people are often confused about psychiatrist and a psychologist at all levels. I've come across that. Psychiatrists are advanced level providers who are medical doctors or a doctor of osteopathy who have postgraduate training in diagnosing and treating mental health disorders. They're different from the psychologists who are PhD doctors and whose area of expertise is mostly clinical psychology. They are experts in doing psychometric testing that helps and aids in diagnosis and quantifying the severity of the mental illness. But the difference is that the psychiatrists can provide medication treatment, whereas the psychologists cannot. They're not trained to do that. So psychiatrists may prescribe psychotropic medications to help normalize the neurotransmitter functioning, which are thought to be in an imbalanced state in any psychiatric disorder. They may treat the episode that the patient is seeking treatment for, and the treatment is known to reduce or minimize future episodes of depression, psychosis, what have you. They're also trained and often provide psychotherapy to their patients. They're very expensive psychotherapists. You can get similar or same psychotherapy through a licensed counselor, but it's a disservice to just write scripts for a patient and not make a personal connection with the patient. So it does end up that the psychiatrist gets involved in some psychotherapy. Psychiatrists may refer patients to other mental health professionals to have a well-rounded optimum care for their patients. For example, they may refer a patient to a psychologist for psychometric testing. They may refer a patient to a clinical counselor for psychotherapy, to a social worker to help navigate the social issues and access services that the patient may need outside of mental health. Nurse practitioners are later comers to our field. I think within the last 10, 15 years, maybe we have had a flurry of nurse practitioners who are trained in psychiatry. They're mid-level providers and they work under collaborative agreements with psychiatrists. They are supposed to handle uncomplicated cases. And they can prescribe medication as well. Okay, so lastly, and as we go about, we have in the panel all the disciplines of mental health, pretty much all, except for the psychologist. I don't think we have a psychologist here today. Oh, we do. Okay, Dr. Ackerman, sorry. My bad. So we have psychiatrists, psychologists, child psychiatrists. We have licensed counselors. We have licensed social workers. We don't have occupational therapy people. We have chaplaincy, I guess, yes. So each will introduce their area and what they do so that you folks are familiarized what the role is, what the boundaries are of each discipline. So I would go lastly to the stages of grief, mourning, and bereavement. These are describing the same process. It's a physiological, a psychological response to the sudden or anticipated loss of a loved one. There are biological markers. The loss of a loved one impacts us tremendously. There are in the acute phase of grief, there are disruption of biological rhythms. There is suppression of the immune system, decrease in white blood cells, a particular kind of white blood cells called lymphocytes, which tend to fight the viral infections, and there is impaired functioning of the natural killer cells. There's also statistics that show that there is an increased mortality rate of the surviving spouse. So if a spouse dies, the surviving spouse has a greater risk of mortality. And for male survivors, it lasts a little longer than the female surviving spouse. There are 5 stages of mourning, starting from denial, which can be conceptualized as shock, moving on to anger at the loss of a loved one, moving on to bargaining with the reality of the loss, and then the actual depression and sadness sets in. And then eventually, after a period of time, the person comes at grips with the reality and start accepting the loss and the absence of their loved ones. You know, it's said that almost no reaction to a loss of a loved one can be a normal reaction. People react to that loss in many different ways. there are cultural elements, there are individual elements, but there is a line where the response may become pathological, and that's then called pathological grief. It dips into depression. Yes, and so there are several terms that you need to know. The grief duration is considered to be between 6 months to 1 year, but this is arbitrary, and there's some level of residual grief that can go on for a lifetime, depending on the circumstances of the loss. Anticipatory grief is for a person who is ill for a period of time, so the loved ones have a chance to start the grieving process, and it's spread out over a period of time. Pathological grief, as I said, when a person who's a survivor start having what we call as survivor guilt that keeps on, that becomes so huge that it impacts their functionality. That's when it dips into depression. And that can also be it can be called a complicated grief process or complicated bereavement. All right, so if you have any questions, kindly jot those down and send it to us. There are we will be breaking into different groups, and I would like to take questions at that time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Ackerman.
Well, thank you all very much for coming tonight. I'm really honored to be here, not only because this is an important topic, but also because we know that centers of faith are so important to supporting an individual's mental health and for making sure that those who are struggling have arms wrapped around them. But with that said, it's also important to understand that that no individual is immune from mental health struggles, and it's really important for us to learn the signs and what to look out for and how to reach out to really everyone in our community, and especially those who might be struggling. It's also really important in this kind of time of grief that we understand that it can be very hard to predict those who are struggling, and we have to be very proactive at reaching out and making sure that that we give everyone the chance to talk about these tough topics. So I appreciate you just opening up your minds and hearts to this topic, and I thank you for having me. What I'll talk about pretty briefly tonight, and hopefully start a dialogue, is what to look out for and how we can begin to have more conversations. So what I do at Nationwide Children's Hospital is we go to a large number of schools. It's actually over 150 schools in Central and Southeast Ohio. And we try to make sure that both the students and the adults in the schools know what to look out for and how to have difficult conversations so that those young people understand that there are other adults in their lives and other young people in their lives who are willing to walk alongside them and understand what they're going through without necessarily judging or trying to tell them what they're feeling. And I think this is something that's been really helpful. So to that end, we've learned how to sort of empower folks in the school settings to get into this area and make sure it's part of their culture. Just really getting into what we look out for. Some of the major risk factors for suicide are a feeling of isolation and disconnection, feeling like a burden, feeling like no matter what you do, it's not good enough. It's also important when we talk about your role as a loved one or your role as a friend. It's important to know that you're in the best position to support because you know what a person typically acts like, typically says, typically likes to do. And one of the things we know about depression and when a person at any age is at risk for suicide is you start to see a lot of change. It could be change in how much energy a person has. It could be a change in appetite. It could be a change in sleep, and it could look like they no longer get joy out of the things that used to bring them joy. It could be that they're saying things that suggest that things just don't have a lot of hope. So literally, if you look at the way that their brain is filtering information, they no longer see that their future has as much hope. They no longer see that the people in their life are looking out for them or care about them, and they no longer feel good about themselves. So unfortunately, it's a situation where the brain really isn't doing a good job of telling the truth to that individual. Because most of the people who I've encountered who are struggling with thoughts of suicide are really wonderful. I work with young people, but they're in a situation where they no longer see the way that the world really feels about them. They no longer see the way the adults in their lives really care about them. So it's a really difficult situation where you often need professional support once it gets to the point of a person showing some of these warning signs for suicide. A couple of things that you might really look out for if you're a parent or a friend is when a person starts to pull back and is no longer engaged in things that they usually like. As I said, an increase or decrease in sleep or appetite. When they're really irritable or hostile, when they're showing a lot of signs that are out of character, and then when again they're talking about things like life doesn't have much meaning for them, that they don't see a lot of hope in their future, and they're sounding very overwhelmed. So if anyone is ever talking about they feel like a burden, nothing that they do is ever good enough, these are opportunities to reach out. Some of the situations that put a person at increased risk, it doesn't mean it causes suicide, but there are certain triggering events or things that make it more likely that a person who's already struggling moves from thought to potential action for suicide. Is if there's been a breakup, if a person's being targeted or bullied in their life, if they're having a lot of, for young people, academic problems, or they're feeling rejected. It's also important to know when it comes to depression and suicide risk, it really matters what the person is feeling, not how we believe that they should be responding. So if a young person, or really anyone, is feeling like what they are doing is not good enough, maybe they're typically a straight A student and they got a B, or maybe they're typically well respected and they have a breakup. These are opportunities for them to feel less than and feel like they're rejected by the people who care about them. So these are some of the important things. And then if there's a major stressor in their life, whether that's a loss of a loved one or some other situation that's very deeply upsetting to them, this is a time to reach out. All that said, as I said before, suicide itself is very hard to predict. So many people experience loss. Many people are unfortunately bullied or made to feel less than for many different qualities. And unfortunately, we're not great at knowing exactly who and when will attempt to take their life. So what we have to do is we have to be very proactive and we have to reach out. We have to make sure that we're asking very direct questions. The research is very clear that by asking direct questions about whether a person is depressed or experiencing thoughts about suicide, you are not putting this idea in their mind, and you are not making someone who was not previously suicidal experience these thoughts and symptoms. So by having an open conversation like we're doing now, this is absolutely one of the best steps that we can have. And we have actually asked over 40,000 kids in schools directly, have you been thinking about suicide? Have you attempted to take your life? And not only are we not putting the idea in their mind, we're taking people who might be struggling and saying, you are not less than, you are not a person who is weak or flawed or someone who can't be accepted by our community because you have had one of these thoughts. So it's really important to have conversations. It's also important to have conversations periodically throughout a young person's life. Checking in, even I have a 5 and an 8-year-old daughter, and we start to give them language around their feelings, around what big feelings are, and even feeling really sad, and letting them know that some people feel so sad that they don't even want to be alive anymore. what can we do to reach out to those people? How can we support them? And how can we have open conversations? So it could be dinner table, could be faith community, could be on a car ride. These are all opportunities to check in and have good conversations. So it's not always, although we highly value assessment and all the other important provider roles that were talked about are critical to ensuring our community be successful in navigating this issue, it's also really important for us to make sure we're having these conversations and to be present for those young people. Lastly, I'll kind of wrap up by indicating that after there has been a loss of any type, but particularly a suicide, it is really important to be able to have open, supportive, nurturing conversations with our young people. We do know that thoughts of suicide and even suicide loss can go up after there's been a loss. So we want to be careful about making sure we are present and available for a long period of time, not just in the days following, but really for months. We're checking in on our young people and giving them the support, and letting them know that if they have this thought, there's nothing wrong with them, that we are going to be there for them no matter what. So with that, I'll wrap up, but I'm very happy to answer anyone's questions down the road and provide any support that would be helpful. So with that, I will pass it on to one of my colleagues, Taktis Khan.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Taktis Khan. I am fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to kind of talk about the role of the therapist at Children's. And I've been fortunate enough to serve on both the inpatient units at the moment. So I think the best way to kind of describe a therapist's role is just like what Dr. Ackerman was saying, is kind of guide and lead difficult conversations. Mental health is a difficult topic, so if your family member ends up in the hospital, the therapist will be leading those conversations while collaborating with the psychiatrist, the multidisciplinary team. At Children's, what I have observed is the difficult conversations start immediately after admission. So immediately we will start the conversation with the patient. We are doing a lot of verbal de-escalation with the patient. They are probably disappointed in themselves that they were unable to end their life, and that is a big loss to them. So the therapist's job in that particular moment is to provide them with hope, and that this was a temporary crisis and it is going to pass. In my clinical experience, what I like to do is the 3 points that Dr. Ackman pointed out, is to kind of figure out through those conversations if the patient is feeling isolated from themselves and from others. Do they perceive themselves to be a burden on their family? Or is the crisis because of something external? Is it trauma? Did someone hurt them? And I think the most crucial thing that the therapists do on our team is to kind of really figure out the extent of psychological pain and anguish, because to overcome life's strongest instinct, which is self-preservation, to overcome that must mean that you must feel super lousy. So because of that initial phase of difficult conversations with the patient, we are able to quickly figure out diagnoses, make treatment recommendations. And then the next step into treatment is to kind of gathering the same kind of information from the families. Families are our co-therapists in treatment. So understanding what their version of crisis is truly critical to the entire process. And a lot of the times we are working with a psychiatrist, we are working with psychologists. If there's testing that needs to be done, we're using occupational therapy, rec therapy, other forms of community supports to make sure the patient feels validated, supported, and that there is hope. The therapist also, over the course of while defining the crisis, is working with the family in safety planning, which starts upon admission. And that is so important. And safety planning, just like the entire treatment, is completely individualized. For some families, it could mean putting away medications and coming up with a lockbox and where they're going to get that. For other families, it means that we really have to spend a lot of time convincing parents to remove guns from the home. We have to do that, believe it or not. And then finally, the most important thing is while we are stabilizing the crisis through doing very intensive individual family therapy, we are also trying to plan for life outside of the hospital. A lot of the times, on the unit that I'm right now at, it's only 3 to 5 days stay, so it's very intensive. But the patients and the families do not walk out of the hospital without a continuum of care. They are going to be linked with a psychiatrist, are going to be linked with a therapist, and hopefully a treatment program that works for them. And what I don't want to forget to say is that the evidence-based techniques that we use at the hospital is called CBT, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And it's a lot of fancy words, but all it means is negative thoughts about yourself, negative thoughts about the future is cognition. Those impact how we feel. And if we feel lousy, then we absolutely are going to behave negatively towards ourselves and others. So that is a therapist's role. If there's any questions, feel free to ask me afterwards. Thank you. Here's Kashif.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kashif Khan. I'm a school social worker in the Reynoldsburg School District. And I'm going to be discussing what my role is. So sometimes my role might be after receiving a safety plan from my wife with one of my students. However, at other times, I may be the person who initiates the kind of continuum of care that we're trying to talk about. I'm with your son or daughter 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Someone may hear something. Hey, so-and-so, my friend said this. In the school setting, they take it extremely seriously. If any teacher hears anyone, if they see a creative writing project where they say something about ending their life or not wanting to live or being completely hopeless, they'll call me and say, hey, Cash. Most people call me Cash, sorry. They'll say, Kashif, I don't know what to do. Please, can you please talk to this student? I will then pull that student out of class and talk to them. And in the course of my conversation with them, it comes out that they have been having thoughts of suicide. I usually give them an assessment tool. It is called the Columbia Severity Scale. And that is just a simple self test. So I hand them the paper. The very first question might be something like, have you ever thought about killing yourself or going to sleep and never waking up? And they mark yes or no. And then I get that back. And I go over it with them. And they may say something like, please don't tell my parent. Please don't tell my mom. Please don't tell anyone. And then I have to gently remind them that that's the only time I break confidentiality, is if they're going to hurt themselves, someone is hurting them under those kinds of circumstances. So I apologize. I will call the parent. I want you to imagine for just 30 seconds, close your eyes if you're a parent. You get a call from me. Hello, this is Kashif Khan. I'm the school social worker at your child's school. Your son or daughter has been thinking about suicide. What would you say? I had a tough week. We had a completion at our school as well. So these questions become really important. How would I react if I got a call from the school social worker? I'm directing this to the men as well. I call you. Who's this guy calling me? Why is he telling my kid he's going to kill himself? or herself. Who is he? How many people tell me, who ask me if I'm a doctor or something? I usually say, no, I've given your daughter or son a test. And I'm encouraging you to take that child to the hospital right away. And guess what? If you do not, under my kind of experience and license, I can call Children's Services on you. If the advice is that you should take your child immediately. And in social work, imminent generally means 48 hours. Okay, so if I say there's an imminent thing, we're thinking within 48 hours. So just think about that as you progress through tonight's events. Is what would I say? What would I do? Would I be dismissive? Would I take to heart what this professionally licensed person is saying? How do I even go about doing this? It can be a really difficult and challenging time. The people up here, this is a community that cares. I mean, just think about the people when we come into their house. We give them chai or coffee or food and all these things. Let's think about what happens when someone comes in for mental health help. Would we give that same level of interest and care? I'm challenging the community. What are we going to do? How are we going to progress? Schools are the first places that your kids spend a lot of time. And it's really important that you, each other, your peers, hey, my friend said this. If you don't know how to handle this, this is what I suggest you would say. You know what? I'm not the best person to talk about this. Let's go talk to the school social worker. Let's go talk to the counselor. Let's talk to a trusted adult. That kind of thing. The advice we give is not friend advice. This is evidence-based advice, guidance, research that we package in a way that is useful for students. This is something that is happening. It's happening a little bit more routinely. I'm going to reiterate what my wife said. The burdensomeness, the hopelessness, the lack of joy in previously held activities, even if it's, hey, I loved going to Dairy Queen. I loved getting some pizza. I don't want to do that anymore. It's just, okay, let me put that in the memory bank. Now there's 5 or 6 other things. Let's have a conversation. If you're not prepared to have that conversation, find a professional. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I am a chaplain, and what that means is that, or I should say what a chaplain does, is that it is a sort of religious authority, a religious figure, religiously trained individual who serves in positions and contexts where people might be separated from their communities and often have to encounter situations that put them in spiritual distress, moral and ethical turmoil. So prisons, the military and armed forces, college campuses, hospitals, these are the places traditionally associated with serving chaplains. So I am a chaplain who has a history of serving in a hospital setting and also an elementary school. That means I can facilitate, Jummah prayers, but I can also facilitate conversations around death, dying, end of life, or anything that you can imagine might come up in the hospital setting. The key to the job, all it really needs is a non-anxious, non-judgmental presence. That is it. That's why I get paid the big bucks. To be non-anxious is to not bring your baggage into the conversation. We all have it. We are all works in progress. None of us is perfect. can we have a conversation where we can set our baggage aside and center and focus on somebody else? To be non-judgmental then is to accept someone as they are, to accept what they are telling you as their truth, that their experience is valid. So all you have to really do is be willing to listen. Right? Something else that helps is modeling vulnerability. To be able to say that you are struggling, to admit to a loved one that you are not perfect, to tell your child that, I was also pretty bad at soccer, and not say that you were the leading goal scorer in Cairo and blah, blah, you know? This vulnerability, this authenticity, this truth about your experience will make that conversation easier. It will be much easier for your child or whichever relation, your brother, your sister, whoever has negative feelings, to be able to express them to you. You have normalized a space of imperfection. I read something recently I shared at a khutbah earlier today. I want to share it again. Is that under every behavior, there is a feeling. Under every feeling, there is a need. Under every behavior is a feeling. Under every feeling is a need. To get to the issue and not just dance around symptoms, we need to look at the needs and not the behaviors. And this is something that I would ask you to consider an assessment of yourself in. Think of a recent behavior that you were challenged on, that someone pushed back against you. Think about what feeling brought about that behavior. And then think about what need brought about that feeling. What did somebody deny you? How did you feel shortchanged? How did you feel misrepresented, unheard, silenced? That made you change your behavior. Inshallah, we're going to break now. Sister Asma will give us guidance on the next steps.
So the next step is we are going to break into, parents are going to stay in the main musalla. If we have any college students, they are going to go to the North Conference Room, which is the last room into that side. Kids, youth from age 15 to 18 are going to be in the South Conference Room. So I don't see a lot of youth in here. And then youth from age 12 through 15 are going to be in the library. So if you have any questions that you wrote down, please take it with you to that room, because that's where we're going to collect them and discuss those questions. And each room is going to have 3 or 4 professionals. And let's go ahead and break out. Dr. Ahlan wa sahlan. Ahlan.
I believe parents, we need to address the parents.
Yes, we are going to keep them here. And they're going to be, as a child support student?
Yeah, but they need, majority of the problem that we are facing
Yes,
in this community is the parents.
I have 3 psychiatrists for the parents. Plus
When?
Here, now.
Now?
Yeah. Yes. So 12 to 15 in the library, 15 to 18 in the south room, and college students in the north room. Let me. Please, is the microphone working on outside? College students go to the North Conference room. Each room has a poster with the age group on it. Library, age group 12 through 15. North Conference room, college students. South Conference room, ages 15 through 18. And the parents, please stay here. Dr. Ramtakar, I'm sorry, I took your name off because I misunderstood the email. So if you can go with the police to the South Conference room, to just get outside.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick around.
No. We specifically told them not to come because with the food, all that stuff. Definitely. Yes, and we told them. So let's start here. It might be, so the panelist wants to sit closer to the audience, okay? I think we still need the mic. Let me see if it gets here.
I'll take it underneath. Is it okay if I go ahead and get started? Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the parent portion. I think there are some note cards moving around the room. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, that's acceptable, and we'll be happy to try to get to some of those questions as well. If you would like, we're going to just put a little bit of parameters on this. We know that a lot of people have some stories to share and that kind of thing, but we're really trying to offer this space as a question and answer. If you do have a story or a longer question, we're just trying to be mindful of everyone's time and all the panelists' time to answer those questions. We can step to the side and we can definitely talk about whatever's happening and whatever's going on. And if you would like, you can stand and ask your question, or you can just stay seated and ask your question. There's a lot of ambient noise, extra noise, so we may ask you to repeat your question as we move forward. So I'm going to give the mic very quickly and have each person on this part of the panel just introduce themselves and their kind of what their position or career or job is in the community. Is that okay? Sound fair? Okay, great. Again, my name is Kashif Khan and I'm a school social worker.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Abul Hassan. I am the medical director and a psychiatrist working with Southeast Healthcare. Southeast is located mostly in the downtown area of Columbus, but we have a number of other clinics also. And we have residential treatment and drug and alcohol treatment. We treat everybody, irrespective of their insurance, ability to pay, and things like that. Closer? Is that better? That sounds too much. Okay. We have a main office at 16 West Long, and I will have some flyer, and I have my cards with me if you want to take one. We have drug and alcohol treatment, South 4th Street, near downtown Columbus. We do run a couple of residential treatment, both for mental health. To briefly describe what we do would be that we are an outpatient mental health facility, but we do admit patients to hospitals, any hospitals around Columbus. Our main thing is that we are supported by the county, so you have to be in Franklin County to be getting treatment from us. As I said, we treat everybody, irrespective of the ability to pay. So if you have no insurance, no money, we will see you and we will provide medication. There is a special process for providing medication to the county. All you have to do is to show up and be there. Our patients mostly come from the hospital who have been discharged from the hospital, but you can come directly to us and ask for help, any kind of treatment. Could be mental health, drug and alcohol, counseling. I'm a psychiatrist, so I provide initial evaluation and medication treatment, but as necessary, I will refer people for drug and alcohol treatment, counseling, therapy, whatever is needed. We do treat serious drug abuse with Suboxone, Vivitrol, if that becomes necessary. Those are relatively expensive medications, so we do need insurance for those kind of treatment. But for everything else, Okay, well, I think that's been more than brief, so I'll pass it off to somebody else.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Humaira Mahmood, and I have a private practice here in Powell. And primarily, my practice is at an outpatient level. I provide counseling for individual, couple, and families. And I have also provided counseling in relation to women and group therapy. Primarily, what I would like to do is when individuals come in, they go through an assessment process, and if I'm able to provide the services, then I go ahead with that. Otherwise, there's also a lot of referrals I provide, and that's primarily my services. I also specialize in addiction services.
My name is Salma Ahmad. I'm a licensed professional counselor. Originally, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. It's been only 1 year since I've been in Columbus, so most of you probably don't know me. Anyways, my background is counseling and guidance. I have a master's in counseling and sociology from Western Michigan. And I work in different kind of mental health fields. I worked with severely mentally disabled. I worked with in individual counseling with all kinds of varied issues. Substance abuse has been one of my field also. I did assessment, substance abuse assessment, and also mental health diagnostic assessment. Basically, and also for almost 6 years, I worked in group therapy with the victims of domestic violence, rape, and incest. So I worked in mental health for like 30 years and have done almost everything. Thank you.
I'll reiterate the question. Okay. Okay. Right. So the question was around what to do with someone who is legally over the age of 18 who may be experiencing some severe or even moderate or even initial stages of mental health issues. What can you do if they refuse treatment? Am I capturing that correctly? Okay. Anyone like to?
It will depend on how serious is the illness. If the patient is suicidal, homicidal, really psychotic. If the patient is really serious, you can call 911 and have the patient taken to any hospital. The emergency room will see the patient and refer the patient to wherever they need to be going. Could be directly to the hospital, or be admitted to the hospital, or being referred to outpatient treatment. You can also take the patient to NetCare or ask the 911 to take the patient, to send somebody to get to NetCare. You can also call NetCare directly, and they will either send a cab if the patient is willing to go, or they will send the police to get the patient to take them to NetCare. NetCare has 2 offices, but as long as you call NetCare, they can do it. The easiest thing is to call 911 if you believe the patient is about to harm himself or herself. If they are not that serious, that becomes very difficult. As an adult, the patient has a right to refuse treatment, and there's very little you can do about it. Unless and until they become so sick that they cannot even take care of themselves, there is not much you can do other than try to persuade him to go somewhere, see somebody that he or she is comfortable seeing. Initially, it may be just a counselor or maybe a friend who has more, who can persuade him or her more. So if the patient, otherwise there's very little you can do.
We are all aware that mental health is quite stigmatized, so oftentimes that gets infiltrated into the family system. One of the really good place to start is primary care physician, because oftentimes we have a good relationship with the primary care physician or a pediatrician. So that's a good place to start, at least to get the conversation going in terms of the symptom of what the person is going through. And hopefully that will open up a conversation and the individual might go through and seek some other assistance or maybe have a conversation on medication possibly.
Another suggestion, another effort that I have seen working is that the parents or the close ones to the patient should themselves seek some help how to help this person. That's very important, because otherwise, as the patient is going down, the caretaker also goes down with that person. So it's very important for the parents or the sisters or whosoever is around a person who is going through, I would say, denial of his illness, should seek some kind of help.
Okay, go ahead. The question was, does Southeast Prevention Services offer some type of group therapy if an individual is experiencing, for the family, some opportunity for the entire family to get some family therapy to help manage what it would be like for that family to make adjustments, as well as that individual who's on this possibly new medication or new treatment plan. Is that fair?
Okay. Specifically, we do not provide any family therapy, but we do ask the family to come in for initial evaluation and any other evaluation. So when I see a patient, I will prefer that some member of the family come in just to talk about it. But as a group, as a family therapy, with the family, continuous family therapy, we do not provide it at this time.
I'm going to get to a written question, and then we'll go back out to the floor. Is that okay? What are the symptoms to watch out for when a young adult starts on an antidepressant, knowing that suicidal thoughts could be a side effect of these medications, to get benefit of the medication and avoiding the suicidal side effect? So symptoms to watch out for. This is an excellent question to ask the doctor as you guys are discussing what the medications do. It's always important to ask, what are some possible side effects? Every medication has an individual kind of response to an individual's biochemistry, that kind of thing. And it's really important for parents to ask a lot of questions about when a new medication or a new dosage is getting started. What's it like for you, right? Don't ask a question like with an answer attached to it already. This is like the therapy side. Is the medication okay for you? A lot of times the young person will say, yeah, it's okay. So just kind of leave it a little bit more open, okay? So just Tell me what it's like. How's it going for you? I know it's a new dosage. Tell me what's happening. Okay, and I'm going to give it to the doctor, and he might have another thing to add around the symptoms to watch out for.
Yes, there has been some incidents of increased suicidal thoughts when young people are taking antidepressants. As far as I know, there has not been any completed suicide because of antidepressant. But antidepressant in young people up to the age of 25 can increase suicidal thoughts. So it is important for family members to be present, at least in the initial evaluation, and talk about the medication. Effects, side effects, what do we expect, what kind of side effects, is it going to create more problems, and one of them would be suicidal thoughts. If the person getting the antidepressant is not doing better but is getting worse, then the person needs to be seen again very quickly. This is more important in young people below the age of 25, but can be important for everybody. Almost every medication has some side effects, so it is important to know the side effects, how quickly or how serious will be the side effects and things like that. No, the same one. Do you want to say something? Okay.
One thing to really watch out for whenever new medication is started is to at least be very mindful of the first 5 to 10 days at the onset of the medication. Any changes in behavior, irritability, too much sleep, too little sleep, too much eating, too little eating, disinterest, not showing pleasure, those are some of the symptoms that often start and also also know what are the side effects of the medication that the person is about to take, so that you're aware of what might be some of the side effects that the individual might be experiencing. So first 5 to 10 days are critical whenever an individual starts medication.
Due to confidentiality laws, it's very difficult for parents or the caretakers to be involved in the treatment if the person is 18 and older. So usually when I used to get such clients, I would encourage the client, and I would also encourage parents to somehow get to release, sign a release of information, so that at least you can have some idea, you can have some involvement in the treatment. And also, it's also important for the therapist or the treatment person to encourage the family to sign a release so that they can have some kind of say in treatment. Thank you.
Just wanted to add one more thing in regards to the medication. Be very aware of the medication interaction, because sometimes when an individual is taking a medication and another medication is added, there sometimes are symptoms that interact with the other medication, so sometimes there are more side effects added to it.
Yeah, we're going to be breaking for Salah at 7:30, so we'll try to get through as quickly, so we'll maybe limit the answers to maybe one person on the panel, just so we can get through more questions. Yeah, and we'll be returning after Salah. Okay, here's a good one. What response is most effective to say when their child says they're overwhelmed and feel lots of pressure? I get this one a lot being in the schools, which is, tell me what's going on in your life. It could be that simple. What's going on? How are you feeling? Without inserting any judgment, what the chaplain has said, That's why my office is the most frequently visited office where kids have no anxiousness, because they know it's a non-judgment zone. I know, I'm a parent myself, that judgment can leak into your language very easy. Okay? The best thing is to say, the best thing is to start noticing all the things that were just mentioned. So, if the student says, I feel a lot of pressure, what kind of pressure? Academic pressure? Family pressure? What kind of pressure are you feeling? Is it overwhelming for you? That's a big question. Is it too much for you? Yes, it's too much for me. No, I can handle it. Now, as the parent or as the guardian of someone, you can start asking a question like, in your own head, how many of these things are adding up? If there's academic pressure, okay, and they say it's family pressure, and there's sports pressure, and then there's all these, okay, now it's becoming a theme. There's way too much in this person's life. Okay, but the best question is a nice open-ended question. Can you tell me how you feel? That's called a closed question. Can you tell me how you feel? Yes, I've answered the question. Versus, tell me how you feel. How are things happening in your life? Okay? Another question. Sorry, there's a question around wondering why there aren't counseling centers in masjids. I don't think anyone on this panel could answer that, as we aren't employees of a masjid. But we could generally say that there are probably liability issues, insurance issues, place of worship, conflicts of interest, possibly. How do you keep things confidential? That's also really important. I have to, like, my license says that I must have my confidential notes behind 2 forms of locked mechanisms. So I have a lock on my door and I have a locked filing cabinet. Otherwise, I could lose my license. So those are some kind of considerations when it comes to having counseling centers in places of worship. Confidentiality, what else kind of services would be there, who has access, those kinds of things. But if you do have a question about the masjid and its things, I would ask probably maybe a board member or someone else. We have a minute. We will go to someone in the audience. We're gonna break for a salah.
Inshallah, we're gonna all come back here. The parents come back here. The college students, everybody goes back. I would like to request everybody to, if you can push your chairs back, so stack them as best as you can. Push them to the back of the main hall, so inshallah we can pray. Jazakallah khair.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا إلى الصلاة يرحمكم الله. Straighten your lines. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما. الله أكبر.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ومن تاب وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله متابا والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما والذين إذا ذكروا بآيات ربهم لم يخروا عليها صما وعميانا والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما خالدين فيها حسنت مستقرا ومقاما قل ما يعبأ بكم ربي لولا دعاؤكم فقد كذبتم فسوف يكون لزاما. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أستغفر الله أستغفر الله أستغفر الله أستغفر الله اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك وتعالى يا ذا الجلال
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There is an event that's going to resume, inshallah, in about right now. So if I could ask the brothers who are praying their sunnah to go to my left or your right. And if you are not praying the sunnah, please go outside for the conversations to continue. Inshallah, we'll be bringing the chairs and the speakers. And for everybody who was in the breakout groups, please go back to the rooms that where you were, and those breakout rooms will continue. For those of you who do not know, we are having an event called Mental Health and Grief Support Event. And inshallah, you're welcome to join us as well. So inshallah, please, brothers who are still in the prayer hall and talking, if you could please go outside or move to the left, my left, your right, to continue your prayer. Jazakallah khair.
We are going to start back. So I don't think they can hear outside. It's so somebody needs. So I guess the other room's already started again. We're here kind of struggling a little bit to start. Can one of the brothers step out and tell the people outside that we're starting again if they're interested in joining again? We are starting again. So parents, we're starting again in the main musalla. College students in the North Conference Room. 15 to 18-year-old in the South Conference Room. And 12 to 15 in the library. Hopefully we'll have another more beneficial hour. And there's for the Q and answers, here's the papers and pens. So if you're interested, just come and grab it or point to me, or I'll come and give it to you. Sure. Help yourself. And you're joined again with. We've added Dr. Ramadan and Brother Kashif and Brother.
Thank you for sticking around. We really appreciate your attendance and attention to this issue of mental health in the community. We're going to go ahead and open up back to an open question before we get to the card questions. So are there any questions that someone has? Yes, go ahead. Okay, it's a really great question. So the question is, when someone comes in or presents with a mental health concern or crisis, what could the sequence of events be? I'll speak very briefly about what it would be like in a school. So I actually had to experience this. Someone was suicidal in school. So my sequence of events would be immediately get that person into a safe spot, get them into my office. I did not remove the item, nor did I challenge them. I let the school resource officer know, which is a police officer, hey, call 911, you may be required to intervene in a physical way. I assessed the person, I deemed it to be legitimate. I didn't even see the means of how they were going to complete. Called the parent. I had another school administrator call the parent. Parent refused to come. Police refused to take the student. I had to go over the police and call the EMTs. They immediately came. We de-escalated after about 6 hours. I was with the student for 6 hours that one day of school. That's an extreme case. Typically, I would do the assessment. If I deemed that person to be an imminent threat, I would call the parent, ask them to take them to the hospital right away. If they're not, I would give them a referral to outside counseling services and let the parent know that this is the proper procedure to have happen. So that would be in a school situation. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Dr. Ramadan. I'm a child psychiatrist. I've been here since 1996. When I was at OSU, I covered a lot of inpatient and ER. That was a very good question. If I'm on call to cover the ER at OSU, I get a call from the nurse that there is a person in the ER to be evaluated for suicidality. What I do usually, I will sit with the kids or teenager or adult, and I evaluate. This evaluation can last from 1 hour to 2 hours. If I feel like he's on high risk, I admit him. If he refuses to be admitted, and I feel strongly that he's at high risk, I have legally I'm obligated to admit him against his will. As a psychiatrist, we have a legal obligation to admit against their person's will for 72 hours. Then we admit them to the floor, we monitor them. If they submit a letter within 72 hours, we have the right to go to the court and submit them and treat them. This is very, very important. What I heard lately, the waiting period to be seen in the ER in Columbus, 6 to 9 hours. There's a lack of beds available and lack of staff. The other thing that I was covering the group of the teenager, I thought maybe I need to talk to the parents here. I am from the first generation. I came here, I chose to come here. I'm married, I have 4 kids, I raised 4 kids. And being Muslim in this, in the United States is challenging for us, all of us. Especially for the parents, they have, I don't want to say low education, but I believe the Muslim parents, they are trying to treat their kids. They are trying to be professionals. You cannot do that. You need to build very, very good relationship with your kids. If you are a mother and you have a daughter, you need to build very good relationship for her to talk to you. If you push her away or you don't like her friends and push them away, you are going to push away your daughter. You need to be aware about the signs and symptoms of most of the mental disorders, especially depression. People, they don't come to you and say, I want to kill myself. No. There's a long list of symptoms. You need to be aware of it. You need to be aware about lack of communication, lack of sleep or sleep too much, being irritable, short-tempered with you, not eating too much, failing these other classes. You need to be aware of that. You cannot sit with your 14, 15 years old boy or girl and ask them if you are depressed. They will never answer you. They will never do that. You have to notice that. And majority of the parents here, they are maybe first generation. The mentality of psychiatric disorder here is totally different than where you were born. Not everybody seeing psychiatrists is crazy, right? And you rather lose your child than the community will say about your child is crazy. Then you need to decide. You need to get involved in their life. You need to talk to them. As a father, you have 16, 14 years old, you need to be more a friend to your child. You cannot discipline here physically. As all of us aware, if you do that, they will remove your kids from you and they will place them in the foster home. All of us, we know that. Or you go to jail. Then you cannot treat your kids as you've been treated by your parents. This is a very, very important issue. And from my experience with the Arab community or Islamic community, unfortunately, that's the problem. You need to come forward and talk. Okay, how about taking you to a counselor? How about taking you to see a doctor? You know, if your kid's not getting involved in activities, not liking sport, pushing away friends, there is something going on here. You cannot sit with him or her and say, are you depressed? Are you going to kill yourself? You cannot do that. Because he's not going, or she's not going to tell you. If you notice a cut on your on the arm of your daughter, you cannot just go and yell at her. You cannot do that. Because she's going to be more irritated and irritable. And then she will cut herself deeper and deeper to the point that you are going to lose her. It's very important to build a relationship with your kids. It's very important. And there's help. If you care about the community, what you will say about your kids and you, that's your issue. That's your issue. The depression can come in all ages. The depression, it's a chemical imbalance of your brain substance or chemical. Even if you feel depressed, feel sad, helpless, hopeless, short-tempered, not happy with your spouse, whatever, you need to get help. Because if you are depressed, you are going to treat your kids in different way. You are going to take your anger on them. You transfer your anger on them. And then they reacted by being guilty and feeling bad. It's very important for the parents to build good relationship with their kids. It doesn't matter when, how old. Never too late. Never too late. Father, take your son, your daughter, you and him only, or her, just to have lunch. Have lunch. Listen to them. Don't argue with them. Don't tell them what I used to do or my parents used to say to me or discipline me. Don't do that. Just listen to them. Open dialogue with them. You cannot just do the same thing as your parents did to you. And be aware, if you raise your hand on your kids, you are going to be in jail or you are going to lose your kids. I see a lot of foster kids. Majority of these kids in US, the American, they are in the foster system because their parents, they use drugs. Sometimes we see a few of them, they've been abused. Other time I see quite a few of them, girls and boys, they've been abused by their parents sexually or siblings. Alhamdulillah, we don't have that in the Islamic communities. But nevertheless, it could happen. You cannot leave a 14-year-old boy with a 12-year-old sister alone. You need to watch that. Because this kid, the 14 living in or going to American school, he's hearing a lot of things from his peers. You need to understand that. You need to be cautious, careful, and have the girls open to you. Let them know that nobody can touch you. Nobody can approach you unless I'm around or the doctor who the mother or dad needs to be around. It's very important though to this subject to continue. I believe my message today to you, you have to do more than what you are doing now. Between you and yourself, you need to sit and think. Am I doing the right things to my wife? Am I fair or not? Am I fair to my daughter or not? Am I yelling at my kids or not? You need to evaluate yourself. Take time. Take time and try to correct that. If you cannot correct that, seek help. And here in US, there's a lot of help. 85 to 90% of the American people, they are on psychotropic medication for depression, anxiety, mood disorder, whatever. Our job as a professional to help you and address or give you diagnosis and start treating you. Sometimes I see kids, they don't need treatment. I tell the parents the problem is you. They get upset with me, but I feel that I did my job. Right? For that, it's very important to think openly and be smart, parents. You cannot discipline your kids here. You can discipline them in a way that the American way. You take privileges. There's a lot of a plan, behavior modification. There's a lot of things. Okay. Any question for me for now? No.
Question. If I come to you and complain about my mental health condition, do you immediately write prescriptions? I don't want medication. Is there any other way to treat? Yes. We don't write medication immediately. Usually, whoever comes in will get a full assessment done. And only if the patient is seriously ill, then the medications are written. Normally for mild to moderate depression, anxiety, and some other problems, adjustment problems, it will be usually therapy or counseling. When that does not work or inadequate, then maybe we'll think about medication.
There are also alternative treatments. One of them is oftentimes used for anxiety, depression, trauma. It's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is done at a counselor's office, and it has given very high level of success. In my office, oftentimes when individuals, they come and they do not want to be on medication, that is one form of alternative treatment that is provided, and very high level of success. Teenagers really like it because you don't talk in that treatment. And what do teenagers like? They don't want to talk. So it has been very successful with that. So there is a website called emdria.org, and you can find counselors who practice that level of treatment, and it's very successful. No, that one is not answered.
So I'm going to give the mic next to answer the question.
Which one? This one? The question is, where can an adult go in Central Ohio for Muslim faith-based grief group therapy? I don't think there is any. There is no faith-based or Muslim group therapy. Maybe this mosque needs to start one. There are problems associated with the mosque getting involved in counseling, but many of the churches do have faith-based counseling. I personally don't know of any. There is a Muslim faith-based counseling or any such group available in Central Ohio.
I believe there's another question about many of my students are on very high dose of depression and anxiety medication. They complain of a lot of side effects. This is a very important issue of the medication. Not everybody needs medication. Depends on their level of depression or anxiety or mood. Majority of the people, they have severe mood disorder, for instance, bipolar. We need to put them on medication. But the key here not to continue adding more medication. The key is to max the dose of the medication they are on and monitor it closely and see if they get benefit from it. The same thing with for ADHD or anxiety. Then you need to build, as a parent or a school teacher, you need to build some relationship with the prescriber who's prescribing the medication. You need to convey to them that, okay, we see some side effect from medication. And the side effects usually would not appear the second day. A lot of parents, they come to me after I start them on the medication, oh, we couldn't sleep. The medication needs at least 1 to 2 weeks to get in your system and to build up. Then you need to be more wise. Any other question about?
So how should I react when my 12-year-old yells at a moment of anger, I want to kill myself?
He wants to kill himself? Or you want to kill yourself? This is a very, very good question. How you react to 12-year-old kids who is very mad and angry and express the thought, okay, I want to kill myself. You need to see why he wants to kill himself. He has a fight with his sibling. He been picked on by school, his peers. You need to find out. If he will not talk at that time, you need to maybe think about taking him to professionals. The issue with this population, especially for us as Muslim, raising our kids in American schools, it's very complex. I want you to put your shoes in their shoes and think, okay, you are with the accent sometime, or majority of time, and you hear a lot of comments from your peers. Then you get mad and angry and irritated, and you take this anger and you go home and you take it on your mom or your dad or your brother or sister. If that's the case, if your kids get bullied, you need to talk to the counselor. This is the school, they cannot tolerate that. If that school would not help you, you need to go further to the board. You need to be involved in your kids' education and see what's going on.
Yes, go.
To answer that question, I'm not going to talk from counselor's point of view, but a parent's point of view. I'm a grandparent now. What I think works with children, when they escalate in anger, you become calm. When they are very, very angry, you hug them. Don't get angry, you hug them and say, MashaAllah, you're having a bad day or a bad moment, but I'm here. I love you. So these kind of tactics actually de-escalate that behavior. They do not, I don't know how old the child is that we are talking about, but most of the time, very loving and caring message suddenly calms them down, and they, for a moment, they think, You can always see even as if they're in a shock when you behave that way. So I would say, of course, if this behavior continues, do seek some help. But also as a parent, you can help the child by calming down, by de-escalating, and reducing these anger tantrums.
Unconditioned love.
The question was, how would suicide triggered by medication, like antidepressant, look? Does it have same signs or?
I think we answered this question already. The
okay.
Medication and suicide. Did we talk about this?
We did. Okay. Okay. Which one? This one. Is the internet and social media are factors of depression? How to limit that? Well, too much of anything can be bad. Internet can be useful, so also social media. But social media can also be used for bullying. And you can get good information, bad information from internet. So it depends on how much a child is spending time on the internet, on social media. Nowadays we see that most of our youth are spending too much time. Even very young children are spending too much time on the internet and social media. That makes it a biggest problem. And obviously lots of informations are available. And the best thing that you can do, I think, is to limit the amount of time that is spent in internet, on social media. Some of the time that could be spent would be for studying purpose, getting information for their studies and things like that, which is okay. But most of the social media, I think, is a lot of waste of time. And obviously, there are problems associated with what information is available. So as a parent, it's up to you to decide how much your children would be spending time. That can sometimes be difficult and challenging.
Just one thing to remember, that if you take something away from your child, what are you giving your child back in return? So if you are taking away the social media time, what is the child getting in return? Is the child getting bored? Is the child spending time with you? Is there something else taking place which is better than social media?
This is the third question about the social media. I believe this subject is very important, and we cannot just cover it in a few minutes. Social media can affect the kids broadly. You need to, if they are under age 18, you need to make sure that they do not have access to the social media 24/7. You need to install a program to monitor the hours that they have access to. At the same time, as a parent, when you limit the time, you need to find some other time for them to have fun. You cannot just tell them, okay, you are grounded from being on the TV or internet, and you sit and watch TV. You cannot do that. You need to find something for them to look for. Have some privileges. Create something for them. Lunches, outside, watch TV, go play basketball, go to sport. You need to find a way how you take your kids away from social media. As a child psychiatrist, we have a lot of concern about the addiction of social media. And people, they can get addicted. I've been seeing quite adults, actually, 30, 32, but I've been seeing them since, earlier. They are still living in the basement of their parents, on the computer, playing game, not going to college, and not working. At age 18, I have to go and do something. I have to go to college and do something. At age now, there's a lot of individuals they are on internet playing games and smoking pot. This is a lot of issue that maybe need to be addressed as well.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you repeat the question? Oh, that. Sorry. Yes, I see it. I think. Like, what exactly can trigger, anxiety and depression in any individual is kind of determined by the individual, right? Their circumstances, what kind of resources they have, how resilient they are for what's sort of attacking them, right? So I think the answer to everything would be yes, it can be responsible. But what are the tools that we have? What are our strengths? What can we rely on when we do feel overwhelmed by what we see, what we consume? Another example would be the news. Can the news affect whether or not we become depressed? And certain people, of course. And, as for monitoring, I think part of the solution, part of the strategy has to be open conversation. How open really is our conversation? What is the conversation like if our child brings home a C on the report card? How afraid are they? What would the conversation be like if somebody says, I don't want to be a doctor? Right? So as I said, it's, yes, Alhamdulillah, leave it at that. The next question was, how would suicide triggered by medications like antidepressants, or what would suicide triggered by medications like antidepressants look? Oh, I'm sorry. Other than side effects of depression, parents need to educate themselves on what is trending, such as the blue whale chat.
Yeah, so Dr. Hassel, I think this was a comment. So this one was a comment. What is I think the next question, the papers are with the, are we out of questions? We have one more? Okay. So when you certain signs and feel your teen has them, how do you encourage a teen to speak and seek help or go to a psychiatrist? I can't read the handwriting.
Yes. Okay, so because they think they're fine. Oh my, I'm not a big fan of this mic. Seems like I'm breathing into it. So this question pertains to a teenager who shows certain signs of psychiatric illness, but they're not willing to go see a psychiatrist, and I believe the parent is asking how to encourage them to go forward with that, right? Okay. So if it really depends. The answer to this question is the answer to this question actually is a question. How good of a relationship do you have with your teenager. If you feel that you're not very close to them, then try to find somebody who they would listen to. It could be a sibling, it could be a cousin, somebody that they trust and you can trust as well. And try to mediate through them. If that's not an option, then obviously it's best to pull information and try to help them understand that what they're going through is extremely treatable in this day and age, and they don't need to suffer in silence, and they don't need to suffer alone. And just by seeing a mental health care provider doesn't mean they're giving consent to treatment, they're just getting assessed. So I don't know if this would help if you have a teenager in that situation, but everybody has a person who they're close to that you can, recruit their help to get them to accept treatment or accept assessment at least. All right. Any follow-up questions on that? Let me know. And there are more questions. What do you advise those parents who are struggling financially and have no time for kids? Ooh, okay. I don't have an instant answer to that. Time is the most precious commodity in this country, and we are pulled in different directions for our time. People would happily part with their wealth, but not part with their time. So I think it's setting priorities, like how much I would rather be poor but be close to my children. I'd rather cut on my lifestyle, and follow the more simple lifestyle of Prophet, peace be upon him, so that I can share the happiness of closeness and the close bond with my family. Is all I can advise. If you think of it as humans, our basic needs are very little, but we live in a society where everything is made to be a need. It's not a need, it's a want. You're competing with the Jones, or you're doing something to embellish. The basic needs are very little. So I would say sacrifice your lifestyle in order to gain happiness with your family. Easy said, hard done sometimes. What's that?
What I just said, it's very important to see what your priorities are. Okay. Cutting down expenses. Sometimes it is possible. Sometimes for some people it is not possible. While Dr. Nan was talking, I thought, that's the best suggestion. But at the same time, I think in situations where you cannot cut down on expenses, I think sitting down with children, including them into your problems, talking to them and saying, what do you think I should do? What do you think will be better for you? Include them in that discussion. And you know what? Children are children, and we sometimes underestimate their intelligence and their understanding of the circumstances. As a parent, we think, they don't know, but they do know. Trust them as having a deep knowledge of whatever is going on in their own very small way. Talk to them, sit down and say, this is what's going on? And I feel this way, and I know that you're hurting too. What should we do? Even a 4-year-old will come up with some suggestion. Thank you.
So there's one comment on this card. It says, other than side effects of depression, parents need to educate themselves on what is trending, such as the Blue Whale Challenge. This has been going on for a while. So whoever had this comment, I want to thank that person, because personally I didn't know about this and I just Googled it right now. Blue Whale Challenge came about in 2016, according to Wikipedia. And it is a form of cyber suicide, basically, where teenagers or children are connecting with each other and encouraging them to come up with a successful suicide. So that's what Blue Whale Challenge is, and I think it relates back to the question that was asked earlier about internet and being on the cyber space and talking mostly on the internet and staying with the internet. Another one that I want to talk about that often I have seen, particularly with teenage girls, and that is cutting. Cutting is a very common form, which often is also done in a group form where one teenage girl will start, and then it will literally spread amongst the teenagers. And one of the ways that you can look for is, for example, during the summer months when the teenager is wearing long sleeves or is really hiding their body even when they are at home. Those are also very important things to look for is cutting, and oftentimes it is done either on the shoulder or on the thigh so that it cannot be seen. So with cutting is not the only symptom. The other symptoms are, again, the depression, the irritability, the frustration. So that's also one thing that we need to look for, because God forbid, from cutting it can go to something severe and turn into a suicide. Okay, so that's a very good question. The question is, how are the teenagers engaging in self-harm behavior? And that is not necessarily in relation to really going towards the act of suicide, correct? So the self-harm behavior is a misplacement of pain. So the pain that is in the heart that the individual is experiencing, they want to displace that pain from their heart to another part of their body. So by harming their arm, let's say with a razor blade or with any other sharp object, they're actually displacing the pain from their heart to their body. So it's alleviating the pain in the heart by displacing it or by focusing on the pain on their other parts of their body. So that is also a way that you can provide help to the teenager, because that teenager is in pain, a pain that is of the heart, not of the body. So that is one way you can provide the help to the teenager that is needed. Do you know of any other form? Yeah.
I agree with Doctor that, when there are two types of cutting, okay? And then Dr. Hassan would know, he has worked with me in the prison system dealing with a more severe form of cutting. Most of those people are dead now. We treated them, we tried to keep them alive, but complications of severe cutting led to death. So even though those were not suicide attempts. So, but in the community, the other kind of self-injurious behavior that I've seen is what the doctor is describing, where a psychological conflict and pain is being converted into a physical pain so they can get a sense of relief. What happens is that when an individual cuts their skin, there is a generation of some enkephalins and endorphins in the brain, and there is a reward circuitry in the brain, and nucleus accumbens in the brain is the seat of that reward circuitry, and there is a surge of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens that produces a sense of relief for that individual. It's short-lived, but it is a respite. It is a break from the constant misery that they're in, and they're converting their psychological conflict into a physical pain thing. I have seen that the course of that self-injurious behavior is self-limiting, even sometimes without treatment, that they would do it in a certain phase of their life, but they'll grow out of it. Sometimes, of course, you need to seek help for them. But then there is that other type that we dealt with in the prison system, where these people were very severely cutting themselves. They were racking up our medical care budget because they had to be life flighted to OSU just so that we can save their life. So that's a different animal than the one that we see in the community. There is treatment for it. I mean, if it becomes an ongoing problem, there are certain medications that the off-label use of those medications either decrease or completely remit that behavior. For instance, naltrexone, which is an opiate antagonist, and enkephalin antagonist, that will prevent them from feeling that high after cutting themselves. And so they will give up that behavior because they're not getting what they wanted from it. So eventually that behavior would extinguish.
I've seen other behaviors of self-harm other than cutting. So I'm not sure if you touched on this. I was kind of distracted a little bit. So I've seen patients that would actually get a heavy object and they can like bang on their arms or legs. Again, the same idea that Dr. Asim mentioned is in release those endorphins and so bruising can be a sign, cutting can be a sign. So it's not always classical.
Good observation, doctor. Follow up on that question where parents are busy with financial needs and don't have time for their kids. I would still say that try to at least secure 15 minutes of your day where in a relaxed manner you can connect with your child. And if not, the whole family can sit together. Maybe the mother can sit with their daughter and the father can sit with the son and have that secured time, that protected time where they can connect heart to heart with them. So what you lose in quantity, maybe you'll gain in quality.
So we have more questions? The financial and then... Oh, there's one. I think more than one of you should answer that. Can you please share with us a list of questions that we can pass out to our youth students? I'm not sure, like, what are you looking for? So further classification, like, are you looking for what? List of questions to, like, figure out if they have depression, or list of questions that they are suicidal? List of questions that they're not happy, struggling? I mean, it's very vague. So what is the next question? You said there's one more? So the next question is, what is society's obligation to reduce feeling of depression and selflessness in kids by reducing unrealistic expectations in studies, volunteering, and other activities. So, Sister Selma, you're going to start, and then we're going to move the mic around.
Can I have the question?
Oh, sure.
The question is, what is the society's obligation? That's a very vast question. I would say, what is communities or Muslim communities' obligation to reduce feelings of depression, helplessness in kids by reducing unrealistic expectations? My answer is that, first of all, we should find out what is producing depression, what is causing depression, what factors are there. If we are talking about one family, what is going on in that family? And then, of course, you will get the answer, from that particular family environment that is causing the depression. We all know that, especially Muslim community and Asian communities, I would say, put a lot of pressure on kids to achieve and achieve high. Just because our neighbor's child is achieving, we want our child to achieve the same goal too. A lot of times parents do not understand what kind of danger lies in that. We as parents do not come with a manual of parenting. We learn as we raise our children. By the time our children are gone, we are expert on parenting. Unfortunately, this is how it is. We should be expert before that, but we are not. So anyways, I have seen this happening, and let me briefly describe a case. A friend of mine called and said that, and I knew her two daughters. She said, my daughter wants to go to the medical school, but she faints every time I cut a chicken and she sees the blood, she faints. But she has to go to the medical school. So what can I do? I mean, that's extreme case, but this is happening in our community. So I would say parents' education is the most important. Some kind of group work, sometimes every weekend, parents get together and talk about these issues. That it would help them to understand. It's not good to compete with other parents and force the child to compete with the next door child. I think that's an obligation upon us as a parent to see every child will succeed no matter what field he or she will go if he has the confidence and if you have given him the tools, coping tools and everything. So, I think I would emphasize parents' education and then go on from there. Children are children. They depend upon us so much. Whatever way we behave, they want to, to come up to our expectations. And sometimes they break down. We shouldn't do that. I think for this, I would answer this question by saying, we should have more parental education groups.
I think this is an important question, and I would like to hear from each one on the panel, because this is the main struggle. This is a very big issue that we all have. So I'm going to start with Dr. Asim, and then we'll move the mic down, because I think we don't have any more questions, and this is the last one.
All right. So similar question has been sent again. Very high expectations in performance in school, sports, etc. What advice would you give to a parent to make them understand the pressures of teens today? I think unfortunately our educational institutions have become the breeding ground for mental illness. just because of the amount of pressure the system, the educational system puts on our children. And I think in such an environment, you need to watch out for your children's mental hygiene. And if you're not going to watch out for their mental hygiene, nobody else will. Because the system is geared towards making them crazy. And you need to either pace them slower or change your expectation. We come from subcontinent. All of us want our children to be either doctors or engineers. Not everyone can be. Not everyone is cut out to be. So if you're seeing your child struggling, change the goal. The goal to become a doctor, maybe it's better for them to become a nurse. Maybe it's better for them to become a counselor. Okay, those are all very respectable fields in this country. Yes, it's a compromise in economic status, but it's a compromise well made. You would not live to regret it. Don't put your children through the misery of choosing between sanity and wealth. That's not worth it.
I think there's another question with Brother Kash. Khurram.
Thank you very much. This is a tough one. Bismillah. What are the signs that we should watch out for when the teen is stressed or not considering their homework and sports, and the teen does not want to talk? So, in a case of what sounds like a total communication breakdown, in the case of a total communication breakdown, what's the next step? The problem is that you've lost each other's trust. And how can you go about rebuilding that? It can't be by saying, I'm your father, you have to talk to me. Right? And it can't be by, I'm your mom, I'm saying you have to eat. Right? That we have to we have these two ways of communicating that we care, right? Either with our angry love or our love of hospitality and gifts. But, neither of those is getting the response. And that's because we have to first listen, right? If you can begin the conversation by saying, I'm not going to speak, see what happens next. And be patient. They won't speak because they're stubborn like you are. How long can you sit in that silence? How long can you sit in that discomfort, a foot away from your child, waiting for them to break? And finally, they'll mumble something. You'll say, like, speak up. Right? Be gentle. Welcome them back. It's all you're going to get in the beginning. Take it in with gratitude. It's not easy for them either. And we have the building blocks of trust coming back. So it's a very good question. I'm sure the other panelists have something much better to say, inshallah.
Does anybody like to comment on that question from the panel? Sorry, I'm behind you guys, but does anybody want to comment on? Oh, you have a question.
I have a follow-up question to something you said earlier. I think I understood you said that the degree to which a person can get depressed or anxious about something is related to their resilience. And I was wondering if you could comment on maybe how to build resilience in children, because I feel like, children who are privileged, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but children who are privileged have less of the ability to be resilient.
Anybody would like to comment on that? I'm happy to. Okay. So I'll give you, and then Dr. Asim also wanted to talk.
Inshallah. So, yeah, I guess we can say resiliency can take many different shapes and forms, and having, living a life of privilege, yes, is, often one of the roadblocks, one of the hurdles that we have to overcome to develop our resiliency, right? But I think there are other examples. So what you are describing is a situation, I think, where somebody hasn't really felt hunger. Somebody hasn't really worried about, is my loved one okay when they go out? Right? Because they have no notion of what kind of dangers are really out there. Whoever has ever left the house has always come back, right? But I think there are other things that we do to sort of trap ourselves. One example is that we will tell our kids that they are smart. We will tell our kids that they are predisposed to certain aptitudes and excellences. What we should be doing is telling them that their effort yielded the result, right? So because you worked hard, you have this reward. If you say it is because of their intelligence or because they're smart, they'll begin to think that, well, if I'm doing it, it must be smart. Right? That brings its own problems. And the sort of the traps that come with that later on, when I can't figure out this algebra problem. Is it that I'm actually not smart, or I was smart then but I'm not anymore? This is a very common phenomenon in what we consider child prodigies, people who are advanced for their age academically at an early stage. And they're very smart, they're very smart, they're very smart. And they reach a threshold and then they're in crisis. They lose a part of their identity over this now, getting a B. I'm sorry, I'll let Dr. Hasim speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're getting over here in time, but let me just make a brief comment. I think the biggest gift that a parent can give to their children is a solid increase in their resilience, emotional resilience. And the best way to do it is not to do it in one big bolus, but to do it through frequent, unsolicited appreciation, sometimes even unexpected, unsolicited appreciation of little things that they do throughout their life. Builds their self-esteem, builds their inner core strength, emotional strength, so they can take the blows of this harsh world. So it's something that you have to invest in. It's like a savings account that you put little money in. So little appreciations throughout their lifetime will end up in a big reward at the end. I encourage all of you to do that.
Any more questions?
Parents and experience, like the doctors mentioned, that we become an expert parents after we raise our kids, right? And mashallah, you guys been through a great experience and knowledge also in education. So could you summarize a few things like the doctor he just mentioned regarding emotion and providing emotion and good warm relationship? Other things that you could provide?
This question is for Sister Salma? Okay. So who would like to start?
I think one of the problems that we have is we have some high expectation from our children that does not always materialize. If you're a doctor, you want at least some of your children to be doctors. I see that in every community, especially in Bangladeshi, Pakistanis, and things like that. Unfortunately, that frequently does not happen, and we tend to push our children. I think we need to understand, first of all, where our children are headed, what are their interests. Unless and until we are talking with our children, we don't understand that. If we are putting our own values onto them, that becomes rather difficult. Many of us come from a different country, different situation, different community. The situation is different in USA. So it's something, some simple things like what do you actually want to do, how do you see your life, things like that. Simple things, keep it simple. Any profession, if they do good, they can always be good at it. Money is not always the question, it should not be. Is what the person wants to be, where they see themselves. I think that is more important than what you want them to be. I think it's our high expectation that creates a problem. Anything else on that?
I think how I would like to summarize it is to say that parenting is from inside out, not from outside in. And what I mean by that is you have to see your child for how your child is, how overwhelming or well your child is able to present emotionally, psychologically, physically, the many traits that your child has, rather than comparing, minimizing, or dismissing your child for how the child may be in comparison to others that is outside the home. So parenting from inside out is more important than comparing your child from everyone that is outside of the home. There is one book that I would like to part with, and it has been an excellent book in raising kids. It is called Hold On to Your Kids, and it says why parents need to matter more than peers. It is on Amazon, and it is by Gordon Neufeld and by Dr. Geber Mate. So it's called Hold On to Your Kids. It's an excellent book if you would like to learn on how to effectively be an excellent parent. Thank you for your time.
Just a quick comment. A very quick comment. I know it's after 9 o'clock. Having expectations from kids is very important. I would never ever, undermine this particular aspect. If we don't expect anything from children, they are not going to go anywhere. But it's the unrealistic expectations or something that, something that you want and they do not want. So I think I always expected my children to do good in school. And that's what every parent should do, but I never expected them to be a doctor. They're all very successful in whatever field they're in. But, I mean, I just don't think that, not having expectations is the best way. I don't think so.
Just for information, Sister Salma and Sister Humaira are therapists, not physicians. So, and we've discussed the roles of each different person. Brother Khurram?
Yes. I think there is a tendency, a need that parents often feel to maintain the sort of idea that children imagine their parents being. My daughter right now, she's 4 years old. She thinks I'm the strongest person in the world, right? And I love that. But at some point I have to tell her that, there's a day I'm not going to be able to pick her up anymore. And she has to understand that, has to, right? And so I think being that honest and being that authentic and being true, if we can take that risk, if we can risk being vulnerable with those we love, our relationships will actually blossom. Our relationships will strengthen. People will find us more relatable. People will come closer to us. I think that's all I have, inshallah. May Allah grant this program and all those involved success. May Allah grant those who are suffering comfort. May Allah grant May Allah grant reunion, inshallah, to all those who are separated. May Allah fulfill the promise of reunion in Jannah and paradise for all those who believe. May Allah grant forgiveness and akhirah, and to all those who are sick, all those who are unwell, all those who have needs that are not being met. May Allah grant us a rahmah. May Allah give us what we don't know we are missing, as we were when we were inside our mother's wombs, and we were being provided for and nourished and cared for without knowing anything of what was happening outside. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for staying past time. We've distributed a list to have your emails, so this is going to be the first of many, inshallah. Thank you for our speakers who came, took time of their day to come and help us out, and we appreciate your presence and help and guidance. So again, if you have any suggestions, you can email the youth email. You can use it through the website. And if you have any suggestions, please don't hesitate. Thank you.